Marxist Muslim in the White House now.
True Marxist believers.
As if it wasn't communist enough.
A Soviet Marxist-Leninist perspective.
Marxist revolutionaries.
It's Marxist demagogic rhetoric.
Marxist socialism, fascism, whatever you want to call it.
It's like a communist system. Everybody wants to tell you.
All you have to do is study it out. Just study it out, and you'll see. You haven't done your homework, buddy.
Stay up there in Marxist vineyard with your buddy.
Somebody else. He's a communist.
Obama is a communist.
What the fuck? Okay, so let's do some of that homework. Our story begins just as World War II was ending. After allying with the Soviet Union to defeat the German, Italian, Japanese fascist Axis powers, the Western nations of Europe and the United States then united in opposition to continued Soviet occupation of Eastern and much of Western Europe. During the Yalta Conference in February of 1945, Stalin had agreed to free elections throughout occupied Europe once the war ended. But in response to a continued Soviet presence, by March 1946, Prime Minister Winston Churchill of Great Britain called it a descent of an Iron Curtain between Western democracies and the Soviet-controlled territory.
From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent.
Soon, many people simply suspected of communist or leftist leanings were subpoenaed before the House Committee on Un-American Activities, where they were questioned, facing severe repercussions if they did not answer. For example, in 1947, the committee began questioning members of the Hollywood film and radio broadcast communities, which culminated in about 300 artists being blacklisted from work.
Fear of communist subversive activities has developed into hysterical frenzy which grows daily.
I personally certainly do believe that the Communist Party should be outlawed.
Soon thereafter, a new Red Scare swept throughout the United States after the Soviet Union tested an atomic bomb in 1949, long before the Western powers believed they would gain that capability.
President Truman's dramatic announcement that Russia had the atom secret caused State Departments all over the world to stir uneasily.
Espionage of United States atomic secrets was then considered the likely culprit for Soviet success, which has since been proved true from documentary evidence obtained after the fall of the Soviet Union. It was in this climate of fear where, by 1950, Senator Joseph McCarthy gained public notoriety by claiming during a minor speech in Wheeling, West Virginia, that he had a long list of communist State Department employees, terming it a political infestation of subversives within the highest reaches of government. The Senate Tidings Committee was formed to investigate his charge, and though he produced no substantiated evidence of proof, his prominence as a public figure increased. During this period, McCarthy and then-President Truman often clashed.
Some unfounded accusation may be hurled at you, perhaps straight from the halls of Congress.
Several times, McCarthy had asserted that Democrats were in league with communists, and referred to Democratic control over government since FDR as 20 years of treason.
And I think it is up to those loyal Democrats to realize that as of today, they don't have a party in Washington.
But in 1952, Dwight Eisenhower, a Republican, was elected to the presidency. In that same year, McCarthy, facing re-election, easily won and was subsequently given chairmanship of a standing Senate committee where he began investigating communist affiliations. By the fall of 1953, McCarthy had begun an investigation into what he believed was coordinated communist subversion within the U.S. Army shortly after hostilities in Korea had ended. It was during this investigation that McCarthy's abuse before the committee of Brigadier General Zwicker a wartime hero, deeply offended the president and party leadership. Eisenhower, also a former Army general and wartime hero, had privately expressed disapproval of McCarthy and his tactics, but did not want to confront the senator directly. Instead, the Eisenhower administration, through party machinations, began working on McCarthy's downfall by instigating a Senate censure process behind the scenes. Ultimately, McCarthy was unable to find any direct evidence of coordinated subversion within the Army. The most he discovered was one lone Army dentist with ties to a leftist organization who had been drafted and then automatically promoted up the ranks to major. Yet, the senator continued these investigations, escalating the severity of his charges as the lack of evidence for them mounted. Public support for McCarthy began to diminish. By January of 1954, it was during these Army hearings that Joseph Welch made his famous retort to the senator live on national television. Welch had challenged committee investigators to provide to the U.S. Attorney General a list of what they had claimed were 140 known communists. Instead, McCarthy responded by attacking a colleague of Welch's as communist, for having been a member of the National Lawyers Guild. In defense of this colleague, Welch famously retorted with,
"Let us not assassinate this lad further, Senator. Look, you've done enough. Have you no sense of decency, sir?"
Then, soon after in March of 1954, Edward R. Murrow broadcast a series of devastating investigative reports on McCarthy and his tactics that cemented public opinion against him.
Good evening. Tonight, See It Now devotes its entire half hour to a report on Senator Joseph R. McCarthy, told mainly in his own words and pictures.
By this time, Eisenhower's plans against McCarthy were well underway. It began with Senator Ralph Flanders introducing a bill to censure McCarthy. Senator Arthur Watkins was then assigned the task of holding a committee to investigate the matter. The Watkins Committee investigated 46 counts against McCarthy, ultimately recommending 2 for censure. The full Senate then voted 67 to 22 to censure McCarthy based on 2 violations of conduct: that he had failed to cooperate with the Subcommittee on Rules and Administration during his investigations, and that he had made untrue charges against the Watkins Committee itself. His public reputation as an anti-communist fighter in tatters, and future re-election prospects doubtful, he became an outcast throughout the Senate, even within his own party. He died in May of 1957 of acute liver failure, likely due to alcoholism, shortly before his second term ended. Since then, the term McCarthyism has been used in reference to exploiting baseless smears in order to tarnish the reputations of others for personal gain. This historical context of red baiting and McCarthyism is the lens through which one should view these smears today. On radio, commenters such as Rush Limbaugh,
Marxist, socialism, fascism, whatever you want to call it,
Michael Savage,
Obama is a communist,
Mark Levin,
I call them Marxists and socialists,
and Glenn Beck,
Marxist revolutionaries,
have all called President Obama and Democrats communist. On cable television, news commenters like Neil Cavuto, Bill O'Reilly, and Glenn Beck again have all claimed that Obama or his advisors are communist.
Tonight, I will ask you, how many times do we have to find a Marxist, a communist, a socialist, a revolutionary, or what seems amazing to me, a simple anti-capitalist near or around or advising the President of the United States?
In addition, Representative Alan West, a Republican from Florida's 22nd District, has also called Obama a Marxist and communist.
They want to bring out an old Soviet Union Marxist socialist theme for their campaign called Forward.
Further, Mr. West claimed during a town hall meeting that between 78 to 81 Democrats of the House Progressive Caucus are communists as well.
I believe there's about 78 to 81 members of the Democratic Party that are members of the Communist Party.
And former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin claimed during an interview on Fox News that Massachusetts Senate candidate Elizabeth Warren had communist leanings.
To have Elizabeth Warren, who has almost confessed to her Marxist views.
Like McCarthy's words, none of these statements are backed with verifiable facts. And if the definition of McCarthyism is smearing opponents for personal or party benefit, then one can only conclude that this is McCarthyism. Dana Milbank of The Washington Post agrees that a new era of McCarthyist tactics has emerged onto the political scene. In an article titled Modern Day McCarthyism, he writes of claims by Minnesota's 6th Congressional District Representative Michelle Bachmann and former U.S. Attorney Andrew C. McCarthy that a longtime aide to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. If Mrs. Clinton's aide is in fact a Muslim Brotherhood plant spreading Sharia law in the United States, she's using unorthodox methods, posing provocatively for a Vogue spread, then marrying and having the child of a Jewish congressman, he writes. As Clinton's personal aide, she has not been in an ideal position to advance the alleged cause. She's not a policymaker. Representative Bachmann is well known for making claims of President Obama having an association with the Muslim Brotherhood or holding Muslim influence in general. These statements should be viewed simply as an extension of 1950s McCarthy-era smears. Even former Republican presidential candidate John McCain challenged Mrs. Bachmann on her false claims of an alleged presidential association to the Muslim Brotherhood during a Senate speech.
To say that the accusations made in both documents are not substantiated by the evidence they offer is to be overly polite and diplomatic about it.
Yet for some in the conservative movement, Joseph McCarthy has become a hero. For example, former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich, in defending Michelle Bachmann's statements from the characterization of them as McCarthyist, actually praised McCarthy against all standards of reason.
First of all, behind McCarthyism, there were real spies. People tend to forget this. There's a new book coming out on Reagan in Hollywood in the 40s, and the book
there were a lot of innocent people who suffered,
and there were a lot of guilty people,
baseless charges.
But there were a lot of guilty people who would never have been uncovered if some people didn't have the courage to take them on. I mean, there's a brand new book coming out on Reagan in Hollywood in the late 40s, and it is appalling the number of hardcore communists that were working in the movie industry. There's been an enormous effort to rewrite history.
Conservative commentator Ann Coulter even wrote a book defending McCarthy, engaging in historical revisionism of the subject beyond all recognition by professional historians. I won't attempt to convince that political discourse in the United States isn't anything but in a sorry state of affairs. Claims to the contrary, Obama is neither a communist nor a Marxist. He is not a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. He was born in the United States of America and is a citizen thereof. Without defending Obama's policies, I am confident that neither Marx nor Engels would view Obama and the Democratic Party as adhering to their ideological platform.
'Cause my teeth are pearly, just because my hair's curly, just because I always wear a smile, like to dress up in the latest style, 'cause I'm glad I'm living, take my troubles all with a smile, just because my color's shady, different baby, that's why they call me Shine.